I wanted to make sure I had the answers to what.
It's you can read it, and we can always go back.
Well, this is something Joel Levitch wrote up, but he's got one brother missing out of this. One of Hyman Brand's brother.
So of course we know Hyman Brand as it relates to the Academy, but talk about Hyman Brand.
Brand Puritz, you see, was the name of the company.
Well, talk about it, because we're doing a chronicle of the garment industry.
Yes.
And where are Brand Puritz in the pantheon of the garment industry in Kansas City?
Well, they started in 1928. They came here.
Where did they come from?
They came from New York.
And that was your.
He had a buttonhole maker. My father-in-law did, and he carried his machine from shop to shop to perform the trade. To help the trade out with their buttonholes.
A traveling buttonhole salesman.
Yes, and the machine was very heavy.
To make their buttonholes.
Yeah, it was evidently, wasn't something that you could find every day.
That's quite a niche.
So he started doing that in New York, and they had a little hem stitching shop, he and my mother-in-law. And anyway, they came in 28. They were offered a contract to move to Kansas City, Missouri, and set up a ladies' manufacturing business, ladies' coats and suits, for a firm called National Bellis Hess. And so that's how they came here. My husband was 5 years old when they came.
Okay, stop there.
You should teach.
Oh, no.
You should teach. Do you want something behind you, a pillow or something behind you?
I don't know.
Because you want to sit up.
All right, that might work.
Yeah.
Okay, there's an edit.
Yeah, so pretty. There you go. So pretty. Such a pretty color.
Isn't that a great color?
Such a pretty
That's a
color.
really great
Glasses
color.
to match.
It just happened that it turned out that way.
Our good luck.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to know, where did your father-in-law and my mother-in-law come from before they were in New York?
They came from, my father-in-law was born in 1891 in Galicia. It's a part of southwestern Poland.
Uh-huh. He was born in 1891?
1891. He's the oldest of 7 brothers and sisters.
Okay, and he came to New York, and you said he left New York in 28, so...
They came here in 28,
yeah,
Kansas City.
So he's about 30.
I don't know. I didn't add it up.
Okay, so...
It says he was 17 when he was determined to set off for America. He sailed for New York in 1909. I didn't know this, but this was written up. We had an exhibit about the garment industry at the Jewish Community Center.
At the archives.
Yeah, and this piece was printed up for that. Did you see that?
Oh, I did not.
No.
So he came to New York
And they had a little hem stitching shop. He and his wife.
And he and his wife made buttonholes.
Yes,
I think that's so fascinating.
That's
such a
buttonhole
niche.
machine.
A buttonhole machine, and it's just it's a strong sewing machine, I would guess.
Well, it's a heavy one. I don't know how it works. They had it on exhibit at the center.
And you still have it?
Yeah, we have it in the family. I don't have it here, but we have it in the family.
How long did he stay in New York?
Yeah, you mean?
How long was his business? How long were they?
He stayed there until they came here in 28. And they came here for National Bellis Hess. And he and his brother Joe and his brother-in-law, Harry Puritz, came here and started this factory. they founded the Brand Puritz company. And he had a brother, Saul Brand, who stayed in New York, lived in New York, and he took care of what we call the New York office. He did the purchasing of fabrics, and he was a key person in that area. We used to make beautiful, beautiful things, and beautiful fabrics. We got fabrics from the woolen mills here. I don't know if those mills are I don't know if they're still open. Burlington, there were big, wonderful mills that made lovely fabrics, and we got fabrics from Europe, and we got, worsted fabrics, cashmere, gabardine, all the fine. You can't find it today. You go in a store, you don't even want to try on the things. The fabric is so cheesy. And we had customers. We advertised that the lining would outlast the coat itself. So we advertised if their lining wore out before the coat, to send it in and we would reline it. And we had people that did that. They owned coats for 8-10 years and send the coat back for a new lining. But we made very beautiful things.
Talk about the evolution from the buttonhole company to
Well, I don't
Brand
know much
Puritz.
about the buttonhole. All I know is that he carried it from factory to factory in New York where they didn't have access to the machine. And he evidently made the buttonholes or showed them how. And
Well, when they brought him to Kansas City, was that to perform that function?
I suppose it was. I don't really know that.
Well, what do you know about how Brand
I know
Puritz
that-
evolved?
Well, I know that Harry Puritz was mostly in the design part. And my father-in-law was the business end of it. My husband was in production.
Mm-hmm.
And
He learned a lot from his dad.
yes. And then he would plan the spacing of the machines. We had as many as 300 people working for us.
And where was the factory?
The factory, this last factory we had, was at 8th and May, 313 West 8th.
Excuse me,
It's
I'm
a
gonna
big
cough.
building.
That's a building that's still around, right?
It's still,
It's
yeah.
part of the
Yeah, it's
deal,
down there.
813 West.
313 West 8th. It's right across from the Poindexter building.
Okay.
And Poindexter is on Broadway, and we're just in from Broadway, east. Let's see, where was I?
So, what do we know about Mr. Puritz? Can you talk about him?
Well, he was a terrific little guy, and he came up with the pattern of how to have a stand-up collar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they had it for their coats and suits. And he was very, very much into design. He was a very jolly man, and they were a good team. My father was very reserved, and they were kind of opposites.
So this was he kind of created
Yeah.
the style.
Yes,
He
the
created the
style of
style.
the stand-up collar was his design.
Well, that's something that's still kind of
It's kind
around,
of
huh?
interesting.
Uh-huh.
And we made coats for little kids, toddler sizes, all the way up to big mama coats.
What's a big mama coat? You mean like oversized?
I mean a big size,
Uh-huh.
22, I don't know how big the sizes go. But the little girls' coats, the label was called curtsy coats. And we had 3 daughters and a son. Well, when they were the age of the coats, the right size for our samples, we would have them model them when the sales conventions came in, that when it was time to model a new line. So it was a lot of fun for them too. And it was just a wonderful time. We had a lot of immigrant people come. And the factory was like a second home to them because many of them couldn't speak English or spoke very brokenly, and they all turned to Pop for his guidance. And so, and then we had people that worked for us for over 40 years. We were in business 50 years. And we had people working for us that long, and we had mothers came, the immigrant mothers came to work for us, and then when the daughters got old enough, they came.
Were they mostly Jewish immigrants?
Well, a lot of them were Italian, and a lot of them were Jewish, different nationalities.
Uh-huh.
And it was, kind of a family affair, even though it was so many people. There was still a cohesiveness there. We had a pioneer club, if you were a member for 10 years, you got a ruby in your pin, and the more years you had, you got recognition. They had a lot of things for the people to be interested in. And I think it was such a wonderful part of their lives because they were productive. And, you feel good about yourself. You really have to be making something and doing something.
It sounds like you took care of them too.
Well, yes, Pop really did. He was very, very much into that part of it. Then at a certain time, we had a little factory in Odessa, Missouri. We made TWA stewardesses uniforms, and we made some coats for the men, TWA men that worked for them.
Was there a signature to the Brand Puritz company line, would you say?
Well, they had, they said they were famed for style, fit, and finish. That was their logo. And Brand Puritz was the factory name. Mary Lane was the main label for the women's coats. Curtsy for the children. And then we had a higher priced line for the women called Bronnie Marlin.
And where were they distributed? What stores sold them?
Well, a lot of stores, mom and papa stores in little towns around. We had salesmen that had certain areas where they sold. And a lot of little towns, mostly, as I say, privately owned shops. And it was just a beautiful time. Everybody was busy, and it was bustling, and they had a whole area down around 8th and Broadway. Have you seen the park there? And they had, we had many manufacturers. And the city really, it's a great void not to have that industry here. And I really think people were healthier mentally and healthier because they were happier, they were doing, they were productive, and they were doing things they liked, and they loved to sew, and it was just a beautiful time. I think it's a big asset that we don't have. And Arthur and I went to many of the places where we tried to make things overseas when the styles changed and they came into all this outerwear stuff where they have all this junky fabric. Anyway, we went to Korea and we saw the girls sitting at orange crates on dirt floors sewing. Well, of course, you could buy the fabric here, send it there, bring it back, and still pay less to manufacture it than you could here. They paid them next to nothing. Then we did the same. We tried to do something in Barbados, and it was the same kind of setup. It was pitiful. We went in Japan, we ran into 2 Israelis that had a beautiful, beautiful factory. And they were making leather coats. And we actually bought some from them and brought them in, tried that. they made a factory, also had a dormitory with it, because many of the people in Japan that came to work for them needed housing. They couldn't travel back and forth. They came from little countries. It was a very wonderful experience just to go and see all that.
Well, one thing that strikes me is that you had a relationship with the people that worked with you
Right.
that clearly doesn't exist today. I mean,
No.
when you think about the manufacturers of some of these big lines, if you want to talk about the outerwear or the
Right.
women's clothing, you know, even the high-end things, there isn't that relationship between the person that's sewing it. Like, I have this image that you,
We went-
Arthur or
Right.
Pop
Right, right.
or
They walked around.
Harry would walk around and
Yes,
actually
they walked
talk to
around.
these people
Sure,
and know
sure.
them, and that's good, or what are
Right,
you doing,
right,
or
right.
can't imagine that happening today. I mean, and what that would mean for the product.
Well, we made beautiful things.
I mean, it invests the
Well,
producer.
you know, Nellie Don had the same kind of, it was bigger than ours yet. She had a wonderful big factory.
Did you know her?
I didn't know her, but did you see the movie that her nephew made? Oh, it's so good. You should try to see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very good.
Tell me a little bit about the environment down there in the neighborhood, if you can think of any. Are there stories or
Well,
anything that you can
people
remember
were,
day to day?
You know, it's like you see in New York where they push the truck, this hanger pieces with all the clothing, push them from one place to another outside on the street. Well, we used to do that here.
From where to where?
Well, see if there were factories all around that area, let's say a 10-block area or whatever. And if somebody needed something or you were making something for someone else, you know, there was a lot of...
You just put it on the cart and shove it down the block?
Right. And they had an association, a garment manufacturers association, and they met regularly. And of course, they were unionized shops. They had to meet with the union. And it was just a big, wonderful business. And you know, that's what's wrong today. We don't produce. We don't produce anything. As a country, we're not productive. That's hurting the economy. It just isn't that right?
I'm trying to produce something.
Yeah, I know.
I'm trying to make something.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, you know, there are...
Something you sell, you're selling it.
You know, these things that you're talking about, they're, you know, well, you take the auto manufacturers as an example. You know,
Right.
that's sort of the archetypal
Right.
example of
Right.
the American problem as far as production is concerned, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
they shipped all that production overseas, and now
Now
They-
they're hurting. Ford is the only one that was.
they crashed, and
Smart,
now,
yeah.
yeah, hopefully they'll be coming back. But
And I hope so.
I think just in terms of the, talk a little bit about what you think, if you think there's a relationship between what you did in the garment industry and the Jewish community.
Well, I think the factory was beneficial to the whole community at large. It didn't, you know, it didn't specify any particular group, but the people in the garment industry were making good living, and they were able to support the Jewish community with all its agencies.
But why do you think that so many of the garment producing people were Jewish, part of the Jewish community?
I don't know, that's interesting. A lot of them were. I don't really know the answer to that, but I guess something about being creative. I think Jewish people are creative, and I think they feel like they have something to offer and that it's good and important to the community. You have to have that kind of a feeling in your gut that you want. It's like being an artist or anything else. You have to be really dedicated and want to do it. Make it special.
So can you remember anything else about the early days down there with your father-in-law and Mr. Puritz, and how do you have? I mean, that was obviously before you were married. But
No, before we were married, we got married in '43. Arthur was already in the Army, in the Air Force, Army Air Force. And we weren't here for the first 3 years until the war ended. We didn't get back to home.
and what was it like then when you came back?
Well, it was, they welcomed us with open arms, that they were waiting for Arthur to go in the factory. And,
Did he want to?
oh, yes, he was geared up to it. And,
And what did he do right away?
pardon?
What did he do right away?
Well, he went into the production part of it right away. He was interested in that.
And what did that mean?
Well, they had I think of this so often, it's so funny. He had what he called time and motion study. And he would help the sewing people. He would help them decide how their production line was going to go. A matter of fact, he set it up and set the machines up in a certain way so it flowed from one operator to the other. But I was always fascinated by this time and motion study process because it was the thing that made you most efficient in what you were doing. And, the people, one lady did nothing but maybe the shoulder part of a garment. They all had different pieces and it all had to come together, and it was a timing. You had to have good timing. And so the process was always very interesting to me.
It was an assembly line.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you think that any of that sort of individual creative investment in the piece got lost once it became an assembly line?
No, it was a beautiful thing when they put it all together.
Everybody took pride in their...
Yes, everybody. Even the
in their
cutters,
part.
from the cutters on. You ever seen how they cut fabrics, layers and layers of fabric, and
I haven't actually.
it's fascinating.
You mean they cut a whole bunch at one time?
Yeah.
With like a paper cutter, sort of?
Well,
a big, thick thing?
I think it was electrical. I'm sure it had to be electrical, and it was done on big tables.
But everybody felt just as invested when it. So he kind of introduced the assembly line concept.
Well, maybe in the factory.
In the 40s?
I don't. I'm not that familiar with all the other factories. There were other factories making ladies' coats and suits too, very good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And
So Brand Puritz was mainly coats and suits.
ladies' coats and suits,
Mm-hmm.
and little toddlers'
Uh-huh.
coats.
Not coats. So
Yeah.
coats and suits and not dresses.
No dresses.
Coats and
Oh,
suits.
we had a few ensembles where there was a dress and coat that went together. We made a few of those.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly it was coats and suits.
Early on. So when did the factory begin? When did your
28.
In 28.
And it started closing in the 80s. They all started closing at once.
So in there in the 30s, during the Depression.
Well, somehow they made it through the 30s. Of course, that's before my time.
Right.
They say a lot of people say that Kansas City was immune to the Depression.
Really?
There wasn't a lot of unemployment here. There wasn't a lot of difficulties because of Boss Pendergast and the open city concept.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to imagine though traveling around and getting wool and cashmere and these nice fabrics, and I guess there were still a lot of immigrants coming in though. You'd have a lot of cheap labor.
Well, I don't know how cheap, but for the time, it was reasonable enough that you could make the garments and still make the profit.
And when you know, as far as the immigrants and the family environment, the environment and the concern that you talked about for the workers, do you know if there was a kind of a philanthropic approach to that? Did you give health insurance, for example, or do you know any of that stuff? Like where if the company helped these people when they came into town?
I would imagine they did.
Help them find housing
Yes,
or
I
that
imagine
sort of
they
stuff?
did. I would be very.
I mean, it wasn't like there was a settlement house associated with the factory or
No,
anything.
but then we had our Jewish agencies who helped people. They still help people get settled.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that the United Way and the city agencies must have had the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So Arthur came in the early 40s, so it's really not. It had only been 15 years
Right.
or so. So it was really relatively young company
Right.
when he came in. So he had a pretty big hand in shaping
he
it.
enjoyed it so much.
He did.
And he always found time to go to meetings on top of that for all the different agencies in town.
Uh-huh.
And my father-in-law did too. My father-in-law was very active in community affairs and in the synagogue. He was a president, and he was also what they call a parnas. It's sort of a advisor kind of person to all the different committees and
Which synagogue?
Beth Shalom.
Uh-huh. And can you say anything else about the intersect between the garment industry? Because we're doing this project as for the Jewish archives as a chronicle of the
Right.
garment industry. I'm just curious, I'm not to put too fine a point on it, but I'm just curious if you have anything else to say about the intersect between the Jewish community and the garment industry in Kansas City.
Well, I think they complemented each other as far as that goes. And, the Jewish community always tried to strengthen their agencies and all caring for each other and caring for others. They always put that foremost. And I think the garment industry helped that along. I'm sure that they tried to influence the people to be generous and give, whether it's to their church or to whoever. They fostered those ideals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then my husband Arthur followed in Hyman's footsteps. He was president of the synagogue. He was president of a lot of different agencies in town. And he was on the research board for 32 years, hospital board. He did a lot of community work. So he found time to do it. And my father-in-law, of course, ended up being one of the founders and the mainstay contributors to the Hyman Brand Hebrew Academy, which is still going strong, and he was very proud of that.
What year did that get started?
Pardon?
What year did that get started?
I should know that. It's 40 years old.
Yeah, I think this is the 40th year.
So that would be 1970.
Must be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to look it
I
up. You
think
better
I think
check
that's
it.
right.
You better check
I
it.
think this is the 40th year, right? Yeah.
You better check it. I should know it offhand, but I don't trust myself.
Was there a kind of a hierarchy in the product? If we go back to the
coats and the suits, some of them you say were cashmere and wool, and then did you,
Well,
were any of them synthetic?
Very few. That synthetic worked its way in, not a whole synthetic garment, but just partly.
Blend.
Yeah, blends, right.
When did that start?
It must have started.
And that was obviously for cost, right? To appeal to a lower.
Right, right.
More
Well, I
economical.
guess you're always on the lookout for new fabrics, but they mostly went in for wools and nice things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The synthetics didn't have that kind of a reputation, you know, and then people finally got used to it. They didn't know anything.
Right. But your
So
clients,
ugly is ugly.
yeah, your clients wanted natural fibers, and they
Right.
expected a certain quality from
Right,
your product.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there
Who
was a certain pride in using, you know, lovely fabrics.
were your competitors?
Well, we had Stern Slegman, and we had Henry Presence. What was the name of his place? See, I could have looked all this up if I should have. Henry Presence. There were several manufacturers of ladies. Youth Craft was another one. The Carrison men. They had a lovely product, and they sold into Hartsfield's and in town, some of the big stores.
Did you sell into any of those Hartsfields or Swansons?
We had
or-
a few, but mostly they were little shops that we sold around.
And where did your salesmen they would load up their cars and
Yeah.
travel around the
Yeah.
region? Did
We
they?
had one man that had Montana, you can imagine, in the wintertime. He was in the snow all the time.
Did they go all over the country?
Yeah.
All over the country, to
Yeah.
New York and California?
Yeah.
And they just put the coats and suits in the back of their car on a rack
Yeah.
and take them to the little shops out in the countryside? And they got a commission?
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how they got paid, but we had a wonderful group of men. We had about, 35 men, maybe more than that.
Can't imagine that happening now.
Oh, my father was a traveling salesman, and we did an interview with Steve Chick,
Yeah.
and he was on the road for his family's business for many, many years, and he would tell stories about loading
Steve
up
or
the
his
cattle.
dad? Steve?
Steve.
What was his family?
I don't remember the name of his company. Do you remember the name of the Chicks?
What was it they made? I don't remember.
They made coats.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
yeah.
Huh, yeah. No, I just,
Well, there were many salesmen on the road selling different things. You know, they had all kinds of lines. You should sit down.
I'm fine. Don't worry. Don't think about me, please. I have to edit that out.
Arthur had a brother-in-law named David Levitch who spent a lot of time with the salesmen. He usually was in charge of the Shell's conferences when they came about. Saw that everybody got what they needed and planned, you know, they used to take them out to dinner and have the show of the new line, and it was a lot of fun.
were you ever in on any of those
Oh,
meetings?
sure.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of stuff did they talk about? What did your...
Well,
what
you
did-
know, the men, they had a lot of stories to tell among themselves about their, you know, the people they were selling to, and salesmen had a lot of stories in those days. They had a lot of good stories.
Can you remember anything?
I don't.
No, not one?
Well,
I'd love to hear one.
they tried to keep it fun, and I suppose they had they had frustrations, I'm sure, along the way, but they try to keep their people, their buyers happy. And I suppose some of the people that they bought from would request maybe certain things, certain types of things, or, why don't you have a short coat, or why don't you have a mid-length coat? So they would bring those suggestions back, and when they got together, they had a lot of fun. It was I don't know, it seemed to me that it was a very good time and a very up time for the people in that industry. And I think most of it was because what they had to sell was worthwhile, and they spend a lot of their time working on it, making it, and I think it kept people in good mental health as well. You can't feel good mentally if you're not really doing something that other people want or need, something to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the industry meant to a lot of people that were in it.
Yeah. The other thing that strikes me too about that whole salesman community is that now you can imagine even there are salespeople that go around, but they have cell phones and computers and
Oh,
Skype.
it's impersonal, see? It's all on machine. What good is that?
Yeah, this was very personal. You can imagine them all
Sure.
coming together and telling their stories, and they're all.
You go in, you're a salesman, you want to make a good impression, you know how to speak to the people. The kids today don't even know how to say hello. It's very sad.
Mhm.
I don't know how that can be. I don't know what, I think the machine, the technology is a good part of the cause. But once you have to be sociable. And it's,
A lot of social to this business.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell me some more about the social part of the business downtown, that 8th and Broadway community. I want to hear some more about that.
I don't know what I can tell you.
Were there restaurants? Were there?
Oh, yes. You know who had a wonderful restaurant? Max Breton was his name.
Oh, Brenton's.
And he had a wonderful restaurant. We used to take the sales group to dinner there at least one night while they were here. They loved it. It was sort of a Cantonese style. And it was right downtown across from the Mule Block Hotel. And then the drum room had wonderful entertainment and food, and there was a lot going on. There's several hotels downtown. And the men used to enjoy that when they came in.
Is that where Walt Bodine did his daytime talk thing?
There
Is that
was
where Walt Bodine did his daytime?
At Brenton's?
He did this. Walt Bodine did a daytime talk.
Yes, he did on radio.
Yeah, he did a lunch thing from Brenton's.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Max himself was, he was a rabbi.
He was?
He was a rabbi and turned into a restaurant.
Well, I knew they were famous for their matzo ball soup.
And they had so many different types of soups available.
Yeah.
Our friend Raymond Starsman started as a waiter there in the late 1970s, early 1970s, and he can still recite the list of soups that are available on the menu.
I love
They had
that.
great matzo ball soup. I just remember hearing that, I think, from my mom. I don't think I was ever there.
I don't know. I never went there.
I imagine.
So Bretton's and were there, now you think of downtown, you think kind of more diners, or either like the Savoy Grill or...
No, the Savoy was there, and my folks had a table there. The men, they used to go for lunch almost every day. They had a table reserved for Brand Puritz.
Really?
Yeah.
So would other garment people be down there? Would
Oh,
they
yes.
talk shop
Oh, yeah. In the Coates House.
in the Coates house?
That's where this was. That's where the restaurant still is. It's in the Coates House.
Uh-huh.
It was a big hotel. I don't know if it's still in use.
No.
Well, they have the hotel.
But the
yeah.
restaurant's there.
Yeah.
The Savoy
Yeah.
at 9th and Central.
Yeah, it's there.
Uh-huh. Was there ever a feeling that you needed to not reveal trade secrets, or was it all sort of collegial?
I don't know.
I'm sure there was some cutthroat,
I don't know.
patent infringement stuff going on, and industrial
it's-
espionage.
Yeah. I mean, it makes it sound like everybody was best friends, but
I
at the
think
same time,
they were good friends, really. Henry Present, his father Lou, and
who's that?
Lou Present,
And his
and
father
his son was Henry
Henry. And who was the other players?
Present.
What about Chasnov?
What did they? I don't know if they had
They
a
were
retail.
retailers.
They had a retail.
Oh, they were retail, that's
Yeah,
right, they were
had
retail.
and Wolf Brothers was retail.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Hartsville's was retail. Lester Siegel.
So you didn't really do, you were more,
More in the outlying
Oh.
little towns, yeah.
Mhm. And who made that decision?
I don't know. I don't know how that came about. I don't know if the department stores wanted certain types of things that the other, say, Youthcraft made more of, or, I don't know exactly.
Well, what was responsible for the demise of the company?
Well, the demise was mostly because fashion changed so much. The minute they started wearing jeans, the whole picture changed. No,
Right.
people don't
The
get
world
dressed-
became less formal.
Well, you can say that again. It became very casual, too casual. I mean, today they wear torn jeans with a nice jacket. That's dressed up. When we used to go downtown on the bus, we used to wear our hats and gloves, and we used to get dressed up.
Well, it's very representative of how people fly today. For instance, when we were kids,
They dressed
we
up.
put ties on and our itchy wool trousers and our
Right.
blazers, and we
Right.
went to fly, and it was like going to the opera practically as far as
Right,
dressing is
right.
concerned.
Yeah.
It's
So what is it?
Deregulation.
What was it about
Well,
that?
it killed our business.
How
Well,
exactly?
it wasn't in style to have a beautiful suit on. The best thing was to go in jeans and these outerwear jackets, these puffy jackets and all this nylon stuff. And
Mhm. But then,
that came in and it caught on.
yeah,
It was cheaper.
yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know why they liked it. I never liked it from day one, but we tried. We tried to make it. We went overseas and tried it. It was not. It just wasn't in the cards to do that. And we were set up. Our factories were set up differently.
How so?
The whole setup, the whole setup was different than for this outerwear stuff. You couldn't do the same thing with our machinery and our things that we had. It was very sad, the demise.
Anything else?
Pardon?
Anything else you think is important?
I don't know what I could tell you.
Could I would like, Betty, if you'd get up and talk about your art a little bit.
Oh,
For instance, these portraits that we see here in the room, are these your grandkids?
these are my grandchildren.
Would you be able to stand up and walk over to the piece and tell me about it? And
Yes, but
and-
I can't tell you I don't have the dates on them. That's where I made my mistake. But I never expected to show this to anyone and try to explain it.
When did you do this?
I did them in the 80s. I did a lot of these things.
that long ago.
Yeah.
So these children are adults now.
Oh, yes. This is the one, the mother of the great-grandchild.
Okay.
This is Shira.
Where is she now?
She must have been about 8 or 10 years old. This is the same girl when she was, let's say 3 or 4. And the boy there is Evan.
Who's he with?
He's 22 now.
And his buddy there?
But that's Shira's sister, Sarah.
Oh, okay.
And this is Shira again, and this is Evan again. And Shira's, let's say, she's 30 now.
Okay.
And Evan's 22. This is my granddaughter in New York. She's 22. And this is Sarah again. So they're all growing, and these pictures have to be updated, honey.
So nobody, none of the grandchildren wanted to go into the garment business?
I guess it was not there for them.
Retail?
Well, retail, that's a different.
None of them were in clothes at all?
Mm-mm.
No?
No, they're all. Shira's helping her dad. He's a structural engineer. And they live in town. They're the only ones of the 4 grandchildren that live here.
Mm-hmm.
And I only have 1 out of 4 children living here of my own kids. And so that's a blessing. I have her and her husband and their 2 daughters and the great-grandson here. Bruce is in New York with his daughter, and Evan and his mother in Minneapolis. So they all come in twice a year. We have a reunion.
Will they be coming in for the holidays in December?
They come in usually the first week in January. They don't like to hit that period that's so busy.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
They wait till after it's over and then
They wait
come.
till after it's over, and then
Yeah.
they
Good
come.
idea.
And then,
Can I ask you how old you are?
never ask a woman how old she is.
If
I'll tell
I don't tell anybody?
85
85.
and a half. Like Betty White says, she's 88 and a half.
You look so great.
You're very nice. I have a lot of my other paintings downstairs. You wouldn't want to go down.
Sure, I'd love to. Are they accessible, easily
Oh, they're
accessible?
out.
They're
They're on display.
Oh, well, let's go take a look.
You want to see them?
Is that
I
okay?
had to show daughters was here for. This is Artie and I, my husband and I. I had it on the post there with my statement, my artist statement as you walk in.
Oh, this is right there in the center, right? Yeah.
Yes, the center.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And this is Reed Anderson.
Mhm.
He's the one that hung the show. He's a art professor at the Art Institute.
Oh, uh-huh.
This is my daughter from Longmont, Colorado.
Uh-huh.
My daughter that lives here.
And what's her name?
Toba Maslin and Pam Ford.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the younger sister of Shira's,
Mm-hmm.
Toba's youngest daughter.
Mm-hmm.
This is the father of the baby and the mother of the baby. So this is Toba and Steve Maslin and their daughter and son-in-law. This is my daughter again. This is the good friends from Dallas who happen to be in. These are my Planet series.
Mm.
I did
Very
a Planet
talented.
series. And these are my portraits. And this is just a sunset. This is a Venice piece
Oh, nice.
we did.
Do you do a lot when you're traveling?
Yes, I didn't do it, but when we came home, I would paint.
Oh, from the photographs?
Well, I did slides and some sketches. These are ice pieces. We went to Alaska, and I loved the ice. I did polar bears. This is Evan and Maya, my daughter, Marcia, Bruce. And these 2 people are, this is Gerald Madoff at the center.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Schreiber, Jacob Schreiber. He's the new, well, he's not new anymore, but he's the director at the center.
Mm-hmm. To just weed everything out of my closet.
This is Arthur at the factory.
Oh, isn't that pretty?
Yeah.
I love this house. So nice and airy.
That's what I love about it. It's so light and cheerful.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing I thought about when I was first time here. And then oh, I'm going to sell them on
Show 'em instead.
sell them on the black market.
Wait. Show him instead of me.
Yeah.
Most recent piece. That was coming back from the Ozarks, and there was a storm coming up, and it was,
This one I'm looking at now.
yeah. And I was so taken by it when I came home. I I tried to paint it.
I really like your style. This is the poster from your show.
It tells you the date of it.
Yeah. Now, where'd you paint this volcano?
The volcano was the first one that was erupting. It was in Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
And it was mostly coming over the TV, but it was very exciting and moving to me.
So the Kilauea.
Yeah, something, yeah.
Right.
I started with the one the taller, rectangle, and it wasn't enough, so I added the other.
I think that's really great. I love the way that
And then Arthur
stair-steps
said,
down.
why don't you make a piece of calm out in the sea with some boats? So he was my collaborator.
Good.
So I added that other.
And then more glacier work
This is
here.
more glacier, and that's also receding glacier.
Are these in Alaska?
Yeah,
Yeah.
these were inspired by our last trip.
Did you take a cruise up
Yeah.
the fjords
The
or whatever?
Glacier Bay.
Yeah.
We also went to fjords. This diptych is what's happening right there when this glacier hits the bay.
Oh, okay.
This is a close-up.
Right. So it's almost like a detail.
Right.
Okay.
It's a close-up of what's happening there. And we
So-
saw the ice falling off. They call it calving.
Uh-huh. And they're making icebergs.
Yeah, it makes little ice flows in the bay.
And now the sun shining here.
That's just a sunset that I did.
Where? Do you remember what body of water? Was that in Alaska as well?
Yeah.
And then here's your planet series.
Yes, there's my Israeli.
Oh, is that Jerusalem up there?
That's Jerusalem, the old city. And
Yeah.
that's what they picked to put on the
Oh, I see. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
on there. They picked it to put on the. They sent
On the
postcards.
poster, yeah.
Postcards out too, and they picked that piece. And these are my planet pieces. The one standing under the lamp is the most recent one. I did it in '09.
I can see your Arthur Kraft influence there.
Yeah, it does kind of.
He has that starry thingy that he
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
This one is on the left is done with palette knife.
You seem to have a talent for working with that thick paint and palette
I
knife.
kind of like a palette knife.
Yeah?
Nice. Those pieces over the fireplace are palette knives.
Right.
And this is
And-
my piece from
The Canals of
Venice.
Venice.
Venice. I love Venice.
I never made it.
Oh, it's so wonderful. The gondoliers do sing. It's the most romantic city that I've ever been to. It was, I tell you.